Hey folks, my name is Cooper, and I am doing my fourth devlog on the game that I've been working on for the last few months called Discovery, or Discovery Corporate Explorer. In this game, you are, as the subtitle suggests, a corporate explorer for a big company in a near distant future where we have space exploration. So you are on an expedition to a distant planet. You are the first human to reach that planet. You are there to chart and document the life forms, the flora and fauna of that planet. You do so by scanning the life forms and engaging in a little bit of turn based combat. Eventually, you discover that there is a sentient species on that planet, and it turns out that your home company is not too thrilled about that. So, that's the general basis of the game. So far, I have come out with an intro that I published on itch.io a few weeks ago, and since then, I've been working a lot more on the art and whatnot, give myself a little bit of a break, just hit a little bit of a writer's block. Just with the completion of the demo, it was a little bit harder to figure out where to go from there. But I've recently been getting a little bit more into the story. This next act, I'm sort of splitting into acts. This was sort of an intro act or an act one for the demo. This act two is going to be a little bit more cutscene heavy, dialogue heavy. So I wanted to show off the story systems that I've built in the game. So first, I'll just kind of show you. In the beginning of the game, you wake up. Well, usually you'd wake up by the bed. I'm by disco just to make this a little bit easier. So you would wake up, sort of make your way around the ship, and then eventually you would come talk to Disco. Disco is going to tell you we are ready to go explore the planet, etc. Right here you've got two options. If I say, hold up, I need some coffee, it just resets and you have more time to hang out. Or you can go ahead and start exploring the planet. And from here you'll see that the dialogue has changed. This one does not have any interaction, so you can just go about your business, right? We have a little blocker right here. You'll see if I keep trying to go, it'll stop me and it'll just pop up that dialogue, keep telling you to go a different way. Just my informal excuse for railroading you for a little bit. Again, these are just different dialogue options that pop up. Right there, you'll notice that that was a trigger that I have placed. One thing that I need to fix is this puts you before the trigger, but there's an invisible trigger that you hit right here that launches that piece of dialogue. And I'm kind of just showing this off right now. So that gets you into the combat, you do the combat, and then you go from there. So that is just a little bit of how the game is scripted out. Now I want to show y'all some of the actual code. So the first thing I want to show y'all, this is obviously the, I guess, sort of the hub of everything. This is the story controller. So we've got our list of story nodes and then our current node that I'm keeping track of. I will go ahead and show y'all the structure of a story node first and foremost. So this is the bread and butter of our story, right? This is a atomic unit of story. So each story node is going to have a little title, a dialogue block, a choice block, and I would say the most important things to look at, it's going to be the dialogue block, the choice block, which is optional, but I would say you could see on that first one, right, we had the choices of either let's get to it or hold up, I need some coffee. That's sort of the decision that a player is able to make. A node descriptor is a thing that I just recently added that I will show y'all. So at each given story node, you're going to have the ability to press H. So again, this is restarting the story. You can see if I press H, this gives me a little hint on what to do, or just like a status update is kind of the way I'm thinking of it. And that's what that node descriptor is. Node complete is the node complete or not, and next story node is what allows us to chain these together. So this is your basic format. I will show y'all the JSON file real quick. I'm storing this in JSON file. This is actually the only thing right now I have stored in external files that I'm loading in. I'll probably do the same thing with characters and maybe dialogue eventually. Well, sorry. this is the dialogue. So the dialogue is stored in the story nodes. So first off, let me just show y'all a specific node. So I have two files. I'm splitting them into acts. That's mostly just for organization's sake. There's not a huge difference between them. But you'll see right here, this is a good example node. So the biome, again, not super relevant right now. This name is just something that I can use to reference the node. The descriptor is that little piece of text that popped up. So you'll see that was the piece of text that I just popped up in that thought bubble. Entry list is within dialog block. So we have your dialog block, and then you have entry list as a field of dialog block, which has your dialog entries. And I'll show you all these two classes in a second, but more or less your dialog block is made up of two things. It's your entry list, which is a list of dialog entries. Each dialog entry is more or less a block of text and a speaker. And then your second thing in a dialog block is your choice list. You'll see not all of these have choices. See, this one does not have a choice. This one has a choice, but it's a null or a none choice, which pretty much means there's an action I want to launch, but there's no actual choice for the player to make. That's a little bit of a roundabout way of adding that functionality, but that's just what has worked best for me. So these are your two chunks within the dialog block. Next story node allows me to link it down here, and then everything's obviously going to start at the beginning of the game as incomplete. The node is not complete. Another interesting node, just to show y'all a little bit more of how these things work, right, is this one. So this is when you're waking in the med center, and I'm going to show y'all this example as well. This is a bigger block of text, right? So your entry list, each of these is a dialogue entry. So this is Disco speaking again, and then Orwell, the doctor in the village. You'll notice that I have these split out so that Orwell has 3 different blocks. That is optional. I have it in here, so I'll show y'all later down here. I have it in here so my dialogue processor, when I shows this little tilde key, switches to a new panel. So again, in this example, Disco is saying 4 different, there's sentences, but there's also, again, right there, that is when a tilde is in there, it switches to another panel. Obviously, it'll do that if we have a new character, but I also wanted it so that a single character could talk, but it would feel like there are pauses in between. So some of these I have it split out like this just because it's more legible for me when I'm typing. But in some of these, again, like this one down below, I just have it typed all the way out with these tildes in between. Either way works with the way that I have it set up. But again, you'll sort of see that some of these have choices. A lot of my choices are just actions that I want to trigger when the dialogue is finished. So there'll be these none choices. Frankly, I only have a couple that have actual choices right now, which this is the first one I've put in that's not just like are you ready to go or not ready to go? So this is when you get to the community center, there are going to be 3 different rooms you could go to. There's a chapel, a gallery, and a library. So right here, again, I haven't finished this. This is where I've left off, but you'll have the option to go to the chapel, go to the gallery, or go to the library. Specifically with this one, I'm going to have a little bit of a roundabout way of finishing these nodes, where I'm going to have 3 nodes, and I'm going to have something that checks in one of these 2 files for, are all 3 of these nodes complete? Once all 3 of these nodes complete, I'm going to jump to a new node that advances the story. But this one, I'll kind of show this one off maybe later when I've finished it, because this is not linear, whereas almost all of this other stuff is straight up linear. That is an important thing to note, that this has a good amount of dialogue flexibility. It has the choices built in there, but this is all linear in terms of these story nodes. I guess I'll show off real quick. This is not particularly relevant or particularly insightful, but this is the loader class for the JSON files. So this is more or less just grabbing the JSON file, loading the text asset, parsing it out, whatever. This is frankly this is very generic code. This is not something I had to really be creative with. So But that's how this is getting loaded into a story data container, and then it is parsed out in here into the actual story nodes. So you'll see adding story nodes, adding story nodes. So even though I have intro and I have act 1 as 2 different files, they all get thrown into the same all story nodes list. Really, that's just for legibility that I have them in different files for right now. So I think the next thing I want to show y'all is the triggers. So for the story, again, this is story node 1, this goes into leave ship, this is story node 2. But for some of these, like again, when I hit that point, and I'll kind of just show y'all as I'm talking about it, when there's like an invisible wall that I hit that triggered something, again, this is built into the node itself. But this is something, right, when I reach this point right here, I wanted to trigger this new story node to activate. That is something that's coming in story trigger. So story trigger is a bit of a wall of text. This one is going to be pretty manually generated in terms of it can't be super automated, so you'll see some of this stuff, right? It's like super hard coded, for lack of a better word. So this one that we just saw is which one is that? Oh, actually, that's so these are ones that it's based on the node itself and the scene. So when I load into a scene and I need something to happen right away, these will be used. So after the first battle, I want a certain node to trigger. So if the node is finish intro battle and we just unlocked Sunflorus, then I want to go ahead and activate the dialogue. Again, manually trigger the node dialogue. I'm going to actively trigger the dialogue for this node. And then this function will go ahead and complete that node. So that's just the way that I am triggering the node right there, because there is no interacting with Disco to trigger the dialogue. There is no physical, invisible trigger wall, etc. But for this one that we just saw, this is the onTrigger enter 2D function. So the player entered this invisible wall, which I will show y'all. We'll go to scenes, intro battle. So right here, intro dialogue trigger 1. This is just a blank game object. You'll see it's kind of just stretching up here, but like realistically, it's when you hit this first part of the wall, right? It's got a box collider on it, so the second you make contact with that, it's a trigger object. So, and again, I've got this file connected to it so I can actually get the details of this specific one. But what this is doing is it's saying on trigger, we look and we compare. So again, since I've got this file connected, this acts as a trigger. So when it's hit, this function fires off. If it realizes it was hit by the player, then all of this stuff runs. Pretty much what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, figure out what the trigger object was named. So intro dialogue trigger 1 is going to be the name of the object that I'm looking for in this case, right? Since the node is leave ship, that means that it is time for this trigger to be used. If the node was anything else, then what would happen is you would just walk right through this trigger. This trigger no longer exists. In this case, though, we do want this to happen. So in this given case, that's why that fires off, because this is the current node. We're ready to skip to the next node and run that dialogue. So that's how these triggers run. That other thing that I showed y'all earlier, so I think it'll probably work if I just run it from right here, where there was like a blocker. So yeah, this right here, where Disco won't let me go this direction. This is another one that is in my triggers. It's a little bit different, but this is a trigger blocker. This is tied to the story because later on, once we are able to go this way, I will remove this blocker. So I did just add this to the story triggers. And the way to think about it is the story triggers are what happens before a story node is launched. And I'm going to touch on this story action in a little bit, but that's what happens after a story node has been executed. So the story triggers, again, this is sort of the prerequisite for launching a story node, or what launches a story node, right? This is the before. The story action is the result of a story node. So this is another one where, again, this object is block access cycle 1 trigger. So you'll see right here, block access cycle 1 trigger. If the node is not this, if this node is not completed yet, which it's not, because this is the node that happens after your first cycle, then this bit of dialogue launches and the wall is active. However, if you have completed this node, which will happen after your first cycle, then this blocking wall gets set to false, which means that you just don't have that trigger, which means that you can just proceed through as if there never was a trigger. So that is something that, again, I know exists here, but when you're actually playing through the game, all you'll know is that right now, in cycle 1, I won't let you go down that way, and in cycle 2, I will let you go down that way. So that's a nice little thing that I've figured out that works pretty well. Let's see. I know one thing I wanted to show y'all was, let's go into the story controller, and so this is the way that I've been testing out the story. This is just literally setting my current node to whatever I want it to be that I'm testing. So this is the first scene or story node that occurs after the demo cycle. So after the intro scene, at the end of the demo, you're attacked by a beast that you are not able to defeat. And when you wake up, you are in this medical center with one of the native creatures. So this is an example of, again, I have not completed any of the previous story nodes, but I was able to get in here and go ahead and just launch this, and the story is running. And real quick, I'll show y'all if I don't have this, and the story node order is off. So right now, it would be expecting the current story node to be the very first story node where I'm on the ship. So you'll see it's just going to be completely broken. Nothing's happening. I can move around. I'm laying down, but I'm moving. If I try to talk to Disco, it's actually going to activate the dialogue from that very first thing. So you'll see this. It's going to let me click these buttons, but it's going to freak out if I try to click one of these buttons because it doesn't know what's going on right now. So, yeah, that's just, again, part of this story system. This is pretty rudimentary. This is quite linear. So this is one of those things where if you break the story pattern, I don't have a lot of recourse. So yeah, this is definitely not one that I would think you're going to be writing academic papers on, but it is what works for me in this specific case. So you'll see this is them communicating in the native language is sort of what I'm going for. And then again, you sort of fade in and out of consciousness, and then they are back here talking. You'll see, again, usually I have the sprites are displayed on this side. You can actually see this little pixel is Disco's sprite. I just don't have a good way to standardize that right now, so I just have not touched on that recently. In fact, if I go in and do this and bump this up to, it's unfortunate, a skill issue. Okay, I don't know where he went. Ah, there he is. But anyways, that's not, it's super relevant right now, but that is, again, just part of the dialogue again. So this is that is really what I wanted to show y'all right there. So right there at the end, you saw the native creature Orwell move like that. That is a story action. So that is a reaction to the story node itself, right? Specifically, that is move Orwell. So if you look in the Act 1 story node, so this was the first one that we saw. right? This was Weekend Med Center 1, this was the dialogue in their language, and then I ran the blackout choice. Again, it's still called a choice, but you don't make a choice, which is why it's just a null. That's why it's a none choice. It just fires off this action no matter what. You don't have the option. And that is this right here, which faded out the screen. And then I also have it so that, again, you fade out the screen, and then there is a function that runs at the end of that fade, which, again, usually it's just like a debug log or whatever, but in this case I wanted to fade out and then fade back in. So I have this wrapped as like a nested function, and then I'm triggering the node dialog within here to start Waken Med Center 2. So again, this is a second example. That's a first example of this sort of story action. This is a second example. You Waken Med Center 2, you have this full discussion, and at the end of this discussion, you don't make a choice to trigger a story action. However, a story action is automatically generated with move Orwell. That's this right here. This little cutscene, again, some of this is going to be pretty manually named, just because they're one-off actions, right? I want Orwell to move that specific distance. I want it to be Orwell, specifically named Orwell. But this is just a little function class I put together to have overworld movement in like a static fashion. So again, when that dialogue finishes, this triggers, and then generally what's going to happen after a story action is the node is going to be completed. That is going to be, oh boy, I don't even know for sure where this one gets completed, but there's going to be somewhere it gets completed. I can promise you that, which, I mean, you know that because now if I go and I talk to Disco, you'll see that there's new dialogue available. I can't tell you how relieved I am, blah, 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 blah. That's this right here, right? So that's the new story node in effect. And one thing, again, I wanted to show off, that's when I hit H, that is this node descriptor. You were unconscious for a while, talk to Disco, she'll know what to do next, right? And then when I talked to Disco, she said, let's head for the door. And one other thing is this right here, I just hit X. So I'm using this thought bubble actually twice. This is what I initially used it for. So my roommate Carlos had given me the idea that when you interact with certain objects, your character itself should react. So that's what this thought bubble is meant to be. It's the player's thoughts or reactions themselves. I just decided to repurpose that for this H system. So again, this is X. That's a reaction to Orwell. However, this is H. This is just a status report, or again, an update on the current story node. It's supposed to be sort of a director in what to do next in the story, right? So that's something that I was able to repurpose and reuse. That's why you make your code as modular as you can. Obviously, I just showed you all some of the least modular code that's ever existed. But, that's you do what you can, right? This is an example of me using a wooden table stretched out to pretend like it's a door for right now. But again, this is just more scripted action. This is me using that cutscene controller. But again, this is just another example of, you'll see right here. Here's the node forced into this choice. This choice is guided to mayor. So this starts the guided to mayor action, and then that is completed. I can't tell you where right now, but I promise you it is completed, because you'll see intro to mayor is the next story node where you talk to mayor and say, why hello blank. And when you go and say, why hello blank, which that's another thing I need to parse out my dialogue. But anyways, I think y'all get the general idea of this. This is how I have my story system built. I don't think I showed off these classes, but this is just the functional blocks of what you're seeing in here, right? So The dialogue block is this right here. You have the entry list and the choice list. So entry list, choice list, this gets parsed out, and you have one dialog block created with those two fields loaded into it. A dialog entry, again, a dialog block has a list of entries and a list of story choices. So right here, this is a dialog entry, this is a dialog entry, this is a story choice. Dialog entry just has speaker name, dialog text, both strings. Choice has 3 strings. Again, a choice, a result of that choice if I want to display some sort of reaction to the choice, which I have not really used yet, but is probably going to be useful at some point. And then this is a named action for the story action. So again, you'll see these are just strings. That's what this is right here. But yeah, other than that, I mean, that's the basis of how I have my story system built out. Again, the one caveat is it's all very linear right now, and some of this story triggering is pretty indirect. Again, some of this I have looking for. So this is another good example, right? This is when you wake up in the med center, or sorry, when you wake up in the med center for the first time, the current scene is going to be med center, and the node is going to be wake in med center 1. However, if you show up in the med center during wake in med center 3, then we don't want to trigger this node, right? So this is one of those things where it's just sort of a manual one-off thing that we need to be able to look for, but there's not a super modular way to do it, so that's just what I'm doing in my story triggers. But yeah, other than that, I think that's more or less all I have to talk about right now. If you want to follow along, you can find the game. Again, I have my demo up on itch.io, so I will link the itch.io page below, but you can find it under the name Discovery Corporate Explorer. I am going to look into putting a Steam page up. I don't know if you have to pay to put the Steam page up, just so I can start trying to collect wish lists, but I'll do that eventually, even if I have to pay to even just get the page up. I am going to put this game out one way or the other, no matter how garbage it is, so that's going up eventually. And I have not been particularly active on social medias. Really, this is probably the best way to find me is here, so maybe just subscribe, like, leave any sort of comment if you play through the demo especially, or if you have any thoughts in general. Please let me know. I mean, I'm more than happy to take some feedback in. I've had, my friends and family sort of play through it and give me some feedback and give me some ideas. I've definitely got a lot of ideas going forward, but you never know when one little comment will lead to the best feature in a game. So please, leave a comment, subscribe if you want to check out any future devlogs, or just follow the progress of the game. Check out the itch.io page. I'll drop my Twitter, X as well. I haven't really been posting updates on there, and I guess Blue Sky is the other one. I know most gaming people are on there instead these days, so I'll drop those, and I'll try to be a little bit more active on both of those. But yeah, other than that, appreciate y'all tuning in, and hope this was, I don't know, somewhat informative. And if not, that's on you for staying this long, frankly. So, bye.